morning. This is Anna Patterson with the North Carolina Housing Coalition. Thank you for joining us this morning for our housing call. And without further ado, I will turn it over to our Director of Housing Policy, Stephanie Watkins.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you all are having a great week so far. We're going to go ahead and kick it off with some organizational updates. We still have our network survey open. It will be open through the end of this week. So we want to keep hearing from you how we can better support your work across the housing ecosystem. So make sure you fill it out by this Friday so that we can continue to improve our news, our resources, and communications as we engage with you all. Moving to federal updates, we are entering day 28 of the federal shutdown. Politico is reporting that a budget breakthrough this week seems unlikely because the president is traveling overseas. And for the first time in modern history, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, is expected to lapse this Saturday on November 1st, which, when we look at North Carolina alone, is expected to impact over 1.4 million North Carolinians, which is about 13% of our state's population. Our Attorney General, Jeff Jackson, and more than other 20 state attorneys general across the country did pen a letter to the head of the USDA last week and threatened to sue if they continue to withhold SNAP funds. The USDA has the money to keep SNAP running, including about $6 billion in reserve funds set aside for exactly this type of situation, and refusing to use those funds would be unlawful and disregard for the well-being of roughly 600,000 children in our state, according to our Attorney General, Jeff Jackson. Republican legislators are also split on whether to support standalone bills that will provide temporary fixes to SNAP and pay for some federal employees. The Senate Republicans are expected to convene for lunch today and discuss whether or not to allow votes on these bills. So we will continue to keep an eye on this. Pressure is compounding for Democrats as the shutdown impacts widen. Yesterday, the largest federal union in the country, the American Federation of Government Employees, called on them to side with Republicans and pass a clean continuing resolution to end what is now the second longest federal shutdown in history. The Senate Democrats maintain that they are going to stand firm in their position and that Republicans must first agree to extend healthcare subsidies that are set to expire at the end of the calendar year. We've been following closely the news and the tracking done by our partners at the National Low-Income Housing Coalition, as they also continue to monitor the shutdown's impacts right from DC. And we can say that HUD benefits will continue to be paid through at least November, but it's important to note that the longer the shutdown continues, the greater the risk to any HUD-assisted households and the greater the disruption to other essential federal services and programs. We also have found that Politico has reported that more than 20 Republicans in Congress have drafted a letter asking the HUD Secretary, Scott Turner, to grant a one-year extension to all HUD Continuum of Care COC grants expiring in 2026. Prior to the federal shutdown earlier this month, information from HUD suggested that they were actually planning to issue a Notice of Funding Opportunity, NOFO, that would drastically reduce permanent housing funding and move the funding to transitional housing with work requirements. And this decision would, just by estimates that we have so far, put more than 170,000 people at risk of homelessness. So lots of things happening, a lot of stop and go, but we're hoping to hear some better news in the coming days. Last week, the U.S. Senate Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Subcommittee on Housing, Transportation, and Community Development held a hearing titled Innovation in U.S., looking at housing solutions and policies for America's future. There was a testimony from the Bipartisan Policy Center as they discussed the solutions and the reasoning behind reducing restrictive land use policies and why it's important to continue advocating for the Road to Housing Act to be brought to a full vote. There is a recap in our call notes for you all to see, both a summary from our partners at the National Low-Income Housing Coalition and other notes. We also want to lift up a really important call to action. We have two right now, one happening on the state level and then one happening at the federal level. Many of you already know that the North Carolina Housing Coalition serves as a HUD intermediary for 20 different housing counseling agencies across our state. And so we are sending a letter to our congressional delegation asking that they restore funding and protect the funding for housing counseling agencies in North Carolina. We were also asking you all to share your story, whether you are a housing counselor yourself, whether you have benefited from housing counseling services, whether you have partnered with a housing counseling agency and you've seen firsthand the benefits either to yourself, your family, your community members, or you know about the important nature of that work. We are asking folks to share your stories. We will be using those stories to send a follow-up letter to this initial letter, continuing to emphasize the importance of housing counseling services for our state, for our communities, and for North Carolina. Moving on to state updates. On the North Carolina legislative side, the General Assembly was briefly back in session last week, and Republicans passed a series of redrawn congressional maps. These new maps are said to likely flip the seat that is currently held by Democratic Representative Don Davis in Eastern North Carolina, which will give Republicans 11 of the state's 14 seats in the House of Representatives. And redistricting, just for context, is exempt from the governor's veto powers in North Carolina. North Carolina is also currently one of 2 states that have not yet passed a budget, and we are not really seeing any indication of a breakthrough on that front. Because of that, and because of last week's events, we are keeping our Workforce Housing Loan Program campaign letter open. For the past few weeks, we've been circulating a letter to folks across our network addressed to leaders in the General Assembly, asking for their support and their action on restoring funding for the Workforce Housing Loan Program, or WELP. After multiple conversations with different key stakeholders and then the change in agenda last week, we've decided to keep the letter open for an additional 2 weeks. And so far, I'm really happy to say that we have over 80 signatures from 30 organizations and over 50 individuals from across the state, from developers to service providers, habitat affiliates, individual advocates, tenant organizers. And so the people that are signing on to this letter really has been a true testament to how important this resource is for our state and for our entire ecosystem. So thank you for everyone who has signed on so far. You are still able to do so for another 2 weeks. So if you've already signed on, make sure you send it to a colleague or a friend, send the link to them and make sure that they sign on as well. Moving on to reports, events, and resources. There are a lot of different webinars and events and things that we want to lift up. The first is happening tomorrow. It is about selecting the next round of opportunity zones. So it will go into detail around the evidence and different field reflections that have been found so far, and the data that will go into selecting the 2026, the next round of opportunity zones, which will be selected in 2026. This will be hosted by the Urban Institute tomorrow, October 29th from 1 to 2:30 p.m. It's free, and a link to register will be in the call notes. There is also going to be on Thursday a webinar on corporate ownership of housing, different policy innovation and organizing methods around this issue. And this has been something that's been on the rise in North Carolina for the past several years. So if you're interested in this, it's also being hosted by the Urban Institute. It's hosted this Thursday, October 30th from 1 to 2 p.m. And again, it's a webinar. And then lastly, but not least, there is a webinar hosted by the Joint Center for Housing Studies of Harvard on November 5th at 1 p.m., looking at how to use data to address homelessness and different insights from a national study on permanent supportive housing and its impact. Events-wise, we want to lift up a few different things happening across our state. There's going to be a groundbreaking in Burnsville at the Sawmill Village, hosted by the Northwestern Regional Housing Authority. It's at 10:30 this Thursday, October 30th. Hope North Carolina, so Hope NC's annual Inclusive Housing Summit will be taking place on November 17th at the Friday Center in Chapel Hill. It is $50 for individuals and $100 for professionals. I'll be there, so make sure to say hi. We do have a link in the call notes for registration, but also to learn more about this awesome event. And then the 2025 conference for North Carolina's nonprofits, hosted by the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits, is happening November 19th through the 20th in Research Triangle Park. Early bird registration is $265 through October 31st, so the end of this week, and we'll have a link to that registration and that information in the call notes as well. Last but not least, we have two reports I just want to lift up. As many of you know, that we're part of the National Low Income Housing Coalition's Opportunity Starts at Home campaign, or OSA. And so there's just a new report released that shows children's health and the intersection of household hardship and its impact on health and children's well-being. And so that connects housing, children's welfare, and health, all three of those policy areas in this article. So if you are interested in any of those policy areas or any of the folks impacted by that, I definitely recommend checking out this report. And then second, a new study shows that about $169 billion is needed in order to preserve public housing and address all the maintenance needs. This is an interim report. So more information is expected, but those are the two pieces that we just want to lift up for you today. As always, please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions, if there are things that you want us to share, things you want us to dive into a bit more. We are continuing to track the situation at the federal level and at the state level. Please make sure that you engage in these campaigns or share them with people that you believe haven't signed yet or that you believe should sign and should be a part of it. This is really a really important chance for our ecosystem to come together and protect these really critical resources. As always, I hope you all have a great rest of your week, and we will talk to you next time.